We don't actually know how to start anything until we know how to stop. There's this word that David uses in the Psalms, and it's the word salah, and it means to stop, to pause, to stop everything. For us, stop becoming, stop trying. In a culture where we are addicted to progress, we are addicted to becoming something. Always trying to start something, always trying to go somewhere, always building, always expanding. At least we're trying to. We never actually start until we stop. I don't know if you remember this, but during COVID, people used to say, stopping will happen to you unless we choose to stop ourselves. For many of us, we saw what happens when we stop. We find out a lot about ourselves. We discover when we stop. There's a whole new world when we pause. Communication seminars sometimes will teach you this, something called the pregnant pause. That if you want to be a powerful public speaker, you know when to harness a solid and sometimes you just let it hang there. Hit them with the point and then let them sit in the uncomfortability. When we stop, we find out what our relationship to stillness is. It's like water. You never really see your clear reflection in water unless the water is still. And it's the same for us when we talk about things like clarity. So many of us never find clarity because we're never still. One of the most fascinating verses to me are the words, "Be still and know that I'm God." Be still and know that I'm God. In other words, it almost implies you don't really know the substance of God until you know the substance of stillness. There's another verse about a prophet, and some people will translate it and say that God spoke to the prophet in a small, quiet voice. So when I grew up, people used to say that God speaks in a small, quiet voice, but it's a bit of a mistranslation because in Hebrew, that word, small, quiet voice, it's actually one word that God spoke in the stillness. It's almost like until you know the sound of stillness, we don't really know the sound of God. But in a culture that is never still, how can we ever hear? What's your relationship to stillness? Some of the guys that I mentor, some of the guys that what I'll teach them to do is, if they're really fast all the time, even if they're dealing with some type of addiction, most of the time addiction is connected to some type of speed. And speed isn't bad unless it's a product of chaos. Most people go fast because they lack control. Speed is not a bad thing, especially if it's a byproduct of control. But we don't really learn how to go fast in control until we learn how to go slow in control. That's why stopping and slowness are so powerful. And so what sometimes I'll encourage my clients to do is try 3 times a day. When you feel pressured to speak, instead just be silent. Tell me it's not one of the most awkward things in the world. It's fascinating. We're addicted to sound. We are addicted to noise. And I'll never forget, as a basketball player, for me, basketball has been one of my greatest teachers in life. One lesson I learned is the position on the floor called the floor general, aka the playmaker. It's like the quarterback of basketball. It's called the point guard. And you can learn so much about leadership through games. But a point guard, if your team is completely out of control, if things are completely against you, all the momentum feels like it's stacking on you, the first thing a good leader will do is control the pace. The second I get the ball, I'm going to slow it down. And I use that in all of my work as a crisis specialist. It is one of the most effective tools that I've seen work in people's lives, is when all else fails and you feel like you have lost all control, control your pace. Slow down. You ever notice anxiety sometimes manifests itself in something that looks like mania? What is mania? Usually a symptom of mania is hyperspeed. So fast. And it's out of control, it's out of control, it's out of control. So slow. I'll never forget, I was supporting a client who was having a bit of a manic episode, and he would run down the street screaming about how much he hates himself. And it might sound a bit dramatic, but this is 100% what the story was. And you have this moment when you're supporting someone like that where you can either get caught up in their pace, or I can remain in control of my own. I won't say always, because there's always an exception. Usually I will meet fast with slow. The faster and more heightened someone becomes, the slower and the lower I will get. And so he's running down the sidewalk yelling, "I hate myself." And it's heightened. You got people looking at him. You've got people wondering if they should call the cops. Like, is this guy okay? But the solution in that moment is just to control the pace. So I just walk slowly up to him, and he's looking at me. We're like face to face, and he's like, "I hate myself, dude, I hate myself." And the solution in that moment is I just looked at him, and I said, "Brother, slow down." It sounded like I was going in slow motion, but it's fascinating, because you learn a lot about what real authority is in that moment. You learn a lot about conviction. You learn a lot about energetic balances and speed. It feels like life is happening to me and I have no control. So, slow down. If you're someone watching this and you feel like everything is out of control in your life right now, the first thing you can do to take your power back is right now, just take a slow breath. Exhale. Slow down. You notice scrolling, most of our addictions, most of the things, the loops we get caught in, it's all so fast. Slow. Selah. Pause. What we find when we slow down is we realize how much of the time we spend reacting from a defensive posture. Most of our lives are not spent making conscious decisions. But when we slow down, we start to find out how many creative options we have in every moment. Infinite options. Notice whenever you feel trapped, how fast is life moving? Is it slow? Oh. Everything feels so fast. Slow yourself down. Try it for me. What we find is real change starts the moment we stop.